All right. We've got folks jumping into the meeting right now. Welcome, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. All right. Thanks for jumping on the call. So my name is Jordan, and I work for the Dallas Public Library. So on behalf of all of us, we want to say thank you for joining for this program. Learning about the Bonsai Society of Dallas should be a really interesting topic. Just want to start off by saying that this meeting is being recorded. It will be available live on our YouTube page as soon as the program is completed. You also may notice that your microphone and cameras are disabled. That's so that we can focus on the content that our presenter is going to share with us today. So if you do have any questions, please put those in the chat box and we'll get to them at the appropriate time of the program. So with all that said, I'll toss it over to Judy, who will introduce our speaker today.
Yes, thank you so much, Jordan. As always, we are so thrilled here at the City of Dallas and the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability to be partnering with the Dallas Public Library to bring you Grow with Us. So the program is really an exciting one today, something a little different. We do that from time to time. We like to bring you a topic that maybe hasn't been showcased that much, and this is one of them. So I work, as I said, for the Office of Environmental Quality and Sustainability. I'm a Senior Public Information Officer for the City of Dallas, and I also am the supervisor for the outreach team in our department in OEQS. So what we do is, of course, everything environmental. That's what we spend our time on. We like to say our mission is to empower Dallas to save the earth. And that's what we work on every day, our environmental topics and messages to try to encourage everyone to have great environmental behaviors. Everything that you can do to help with the environment is key. It's critical. As we see with these temperature swings and just all the different things that are arising here in North Texas, but also throughout the United States, the different weather conditions, the fires, just so many different things. Everything that we can do, it may seem so small, but one of the things we like to say is don't litter. It makes the world better. So if you dropped the other day, the wind was really strong and I dropped a receipt when I was walking out of a store. It was safe for me to do it, but I did chase down that receipt and grabbed it because I thought I'm not going to let that end up in a storm drain in our water supply. So everything that we can do, whether it's adhere to the twice weekly watering schedule, although it's tempting right now to water more, but you can hand water all that you want in your yard, but save the water, water wisely, don't litter, pick up your pet waste, and plant something. You know, this program is all about growing things, all kinds of plants and edibles, and then wonderful things in our homes too, because plants create the oxygen that we so need to have quality of life. And one of the most exciting, I think, plant forms and interesting is, and I'm going to say it wrong, although Brian has coached me, bonsai. So that's a living art form that's so fascinating, I think, to me and to many people. And we're going to hear about it today. So today, this program is going to actually be a two-part program. And Brian's going to kick it off. He's the president of the Bonsai Society of Dallas. And he is here with us to talk about kind of the early beginnings and the Asian influence of bonsai and some of the other influences, but also really introduce us to the society, what they do, how they tie in with other programs here in North Texas. And with that, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about him. So Brian Myers is the president of the Bonsai Society of Dallas, and he's been very dedicated to this art form for a long time. He has been active in plant propagation since his first experiments with willow tree cuttings at the age of 11. So you can see he's always loved plants and worked around them and been fascinated with them and learned about them. He has invented and improved various different propagation devices and processes over the years, and he's involved in commercial horticulture since 2000. He currently owns and operates the Bonsai Nursery in Coppell, Texas. He returned to bonsai practice in 2016 and quickly took to propagating various different species for bonsai's specialized horticultural needs. I don't know about you all, but that just sounds so complex to me. And I can't wait to hear more about it. Serving as a member at large, vice president, and now as president of the Bonsai Society of Dallas. He has participated on the board of directors since 2018. So, in our next program, which will be June the 7th, he's actually going to provide us with Bonsai 101. 101. Let me see if I can say that correctly. And I can't wait for that one as well. So Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. We can't wait to hear all about this, and take it away.
Thank you, Judy. Again, as Judy mentioned, my name is Brian Myers. I am the owner of Pre-Bonsai Nursery in Coppell, and I am the president of the Bonsai Society of Dallas. And if you hear a little bit of a distinction there between what Judy was saying and what I'm saying, the proper way to say bonsai is think of the word bone, as in my bones, and then the word sai. So bonsai is the correct way to say it. My mission today is to teach you or illustrate for you some of the history and Asian influences, as well as some of the global influences of bonsai and how those influences develop over the centuries. So what you're seeing in front of you right now is the kanji depiction of the word bonsai. This is the typical character set used in Japanese to write the word bonsai. And bonsai is the literal translation of bonsai is tray planting, but it has come to mean a lot more over the years, centuries, really. It is a collection of horticultural methods and styling practices that achieve the objective of a mature, miniaturized tree in a container. In America, we tend to get a hold of things and they become a lot of times some things they're not. Bonsai has also become a very commercialized term to appeal from an advertising perspective to the masses. And these really create a lot of misinterpretations about what bonsai is or how you do bonsai. You may, when you're sitting in the doctor's office, be leafing through some Architectural Digest magazine and see a picture of a really nice room and the nice furniture and the nice architecture in the room, and see a bonsai sitting on the sofa table or on the coffee table, and get the impression that bonsai is an inside hobby, and it is not. It is an outside hobby. Those trees come inside for pictures very briefly, and then they go right back outside. You can, if you have a really good healthy tree, bring it inside for display at a party or something like that, but it really needs to go back outside. There are some minor exceptions to tropical trees and such, but I'll get more into that in 2 weeks when we spend more time talking about how to actually do bonsai. There's nothing necessarily wrong with the commercialized perspective of bonsai, except that to get the most out of it, it's really best to come into it with an open mind about what it really is, because once advertisers and mass producers get a hold of something, you really don't know what you're seeing anymore in bonsai or anything really. So to get the most out of bonsai, you really need to understand the history and the Asian traditions. Bonsai began actually in China, as the term in China is called penjing. Penjing is known for sure to exist from at least the early 8th century, but it had to have existed long before, because the depictions that we see of bonsai from around 700, 706 AD already show fairly refined Penjing settings and pieces. And to get to that point, it would have taken several hundred years of refinement and knowledge acquisition in order to achieve that. The connection to Taoist philosophies is really central to Penjing and also bonsai, and remains so to this day. I actually moderate and administer several bonsai groups on Facebook, and there are different questions that each of these groups ask. But one of the common questions is, what do you like most about bonsai? And by far and away, the number one answer that people say is the peaceful feeling that they get from either observing bonsai or practicing bonsai. The peace and tranquility is central at the origin, and it thankfully remains central to this day. I think with all the hustle and bustle in society and all the conflicts we see everywhere, people are really anxious to introduce some peace and tranquility into their lives. And bonsai is and can be a great way to achieve that. The Taoist philosophy, referring to basically being in harmony with quote unquote the all or the everything, is central to this concept. Where'd my... Oh, there it goes. So here we see some interpretations of Penjing dating all the way back to the 8th century. And as I mentioned before, these are actually already very refined depictions of Penjing, and they're also in place for royalty and imperial courts, which suggests that there has been already many decades and or centuries of refinement just to get to this point, even though this is the earliest depictions that we're actually able to find of these. From the 6th century, Buddhists connected with Penjing, and spread it to Japan. The Taoist and Buddhist influences on Penjing ultimately became really very clear when I start to show you some of the actual pieces. The Zen, peaceful and calm in the self, and the Tao connected to quote unquote the all, really live in harmony with each other all through Asia, including Japan. But the horticulture of bonsai is really the driving force that changes and modifies the styles from Penjing to bonsai, and then also the different styles of Penjing that exist all across Asia and now all around the world. And the reason horticulture is important is because you can't have a dead tree and have it be art. Well, I guess you can, but it no longer continues to grow. So how you grow trees, whether it's a pine or some type of deciduous material, are affected by where you are, and whether you're in Southern Asia or Eastern Asia or Northern Asia or Japan, or even into the Asian Pacific area. All of those local regions have different weather and different environments. And so naturally, how you grow your penjing or bonsai is determined by the weather that you have, the environment in which you live. And so this really began to drive the different styles and types, as well as local cultures create different derivatives, the different things, aspects of life that different cultures determine to be critical or important in their worlds end up being reflected in their art. You really begin to see a divergence between penjing and many of the local styles illustrated in the artwork that is shown or been able to be recovered by archaeologists around the medieval period. For just one example, Chinese use of figurines and miniature structures in penjing gradually faded from Japanese bonsai in favor of a simple and more refined, uniquely Japanese style. What we see here is this is actually a penjing. This is created modern. And although we see these pictures in magazines or on the internet or in somebody's home, and we just use an umbrella term to call it bonsai, this is actually penjing. And you can see the composition uses sculpted rocks, multiple tree trunks, other plants. You see down around the lower left section there, there's other plants involved. You also see the figurines, but most importantly, this penjing is in direct contact and direct relationship with actual water inside the tray in which it's planted. And this is a classic example of Shuhan penjing. Conversely, this is also a modern creation by the brilliant artist Juan Laga, similar to the penjing in its appearance, but it lacks the water, it lacks the figurines, and it lacks the sculpted rocks. Thus, this is what's called the Yoseus forest. And here I will compare the two together. Still, though one is considered penjing and the other is considered bonsai, both compositions convey the Asian Taoist philosophy of serenity and being one with the all. The penjing may tend to make a more human connection with that, a relationship, so to speak. Who can't, relate to sitting beside a stream or a lake or something and meditating or contemplating the day or whatever troubles we have in our life and just finding peace sitting beside water under a tree. And so penjing really kind of creates that direct personal relationship, whereas bonsai conveys the feeling to the artist in somewhat of a different way. Just the feeling of the setting achieves the end result without necessarily needing to inject yourself into that scene. But we see here there's some different design elements also with this slide. The bonsai on the right uses perspective to expand the realm of the composition beyond just what is on the slab. Actually, this is not in a pot. You can see underneath it, this is actually on a rock slab. But the use of these smaller trees to the side and to the middle and then set to the back adds perspective that this is actually a much more deep scene, has more depth to it than what you would get in a normal penjing, where you really are in penjing, you just really are looking at at setting the actual local scene just as you see it without trying to expand beyond its actual focus. So that's really a definite cultural impact. There's differences in the trees because of the difference in the environment between China and Japan, but there's also the cultural impacts as well. So I'll get back to the commercial influence of the art, or our perspective here is not Japanese. Our perspective here is not Chinese. Our perspective here is American, and our American culture influences everything we do, not just the multiple regional climates and environments that exist in our country, but also our culture. And a lot of it is not in keeping with the peaceful Zen Tao mindset. There is, and a lot of people may see when they go through the Home Depot, or they may go through different settings and see bonsai advertised. Well, the reality is, although I'm sure we all want to think best of everybody and everything that they sell, the reality is those products, we have come, the experienced, knowledgeable people in bonsai have come to refer to those products as malsai. They're really not bonsai, they're malsai. They have been quickly produced for mass production. They don't have very healthy roots. They're generally not very healthy. They have relied on regular employees to water them, and usually they don't. And most of the time when people buy those trees, sadly, they die. Unfortunately, a lot of times that gives people a bad impression of what bonsai is all about, but oftentimes it doesn't. Sometimes they come and join our society, or they join a Facebook group, and they begin to learn how to achieve their quest of peace of mind and tranquility. Bonsai has come to mean in a lot of people's minds, going back to the beginning where I mentioned that it's a tray planting. Well, technically speaking, you consider anything that's in a pot, anything on a tray, or anything in a slab to be bonsai based on that definition. But this tends to create some conflicts with experienced practitioners, because I personally am agnostic about how people use the term bonsai and whether or not they want to call their tree a bonsai, or whether they recognize that it is only just beginning its journey as bonsai. And other people, when they look at your bonsai, see a stick in a pot. And unfortunately, sometimes some of those people, especially in Texas, are kind of blunt about referring to your bonsai as a stick in a pot. And so there can become some conflicts that come to exist. And although I don't want to get too far down this as a rabbit hole, this does affect the style and culture of bonsai in this country. I use this as an example of describing how the Asian intent, which seems to be present in everybody's mind, in practice, a lot of times in this country, initially gets lost in our culture until they manage to get a hold of bonsai society that's local to them, or join a Facebook group that has good help that will help them understand the difference between what their initial impressions are and what actually is the case. It's kind of a self-empowered culture that we have here where it is what you say it is, regardless of whether other people see it that way. And that's fine. If you want to call your stick in a pot a bonsai, that's fine. My job is to assist you progressing it to the point where everybody sees it as bonsai. There's a lot of fraud that comes into the style of bonsai in this country. There's a lot of people marketing malsai as bonsai. There's a lot of people selling bonsai seeds, which there is literally no such thing. Any seed grows into any tree, whether you style it horticulturally as bonsai or whether you stick it in your yard or a forest. Nursery stock, sometimes people go to nurseries and they buy a whole bunch of junipers and they take them home and they sell them on eBay as bonsai, and they jack the price up and people buy it. It's all fraud. But it again, it affects the culture of bonsai in this country in ways that you just do not see in Europe or in Asia. It just doesn't. A little bit in Australia, but for the most part, you just do not see the type of charlatanism in the culture of bonsai in the rest of the world other than here. And it begins to affect the style of bonsai that you see in this country. So true Penjing and true bonsai have a myriad of sizes and styles, and I've put some of the definitions and descriptions here, but this is really just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to different names and definitions of Penjing and bonsai styles. Really, what you see here on the right is the common names for the bonsai size classes. And oddly enough, though they each have names, and you see on the far right where there's a tree height definition, that is another way of how the American culture affects bonsai style in this country. We seem intent to define everything down to the millimeters a lot of times. Everything seems to need to have an actual definition. But in Japan, you don't see tree height definitions to what a shohin bonsai is. They literally go by how you carry it, whether it's 8-handed or 6-handed. 8-handed obviously is so large. 8 hands means it takes 4 people to carry it. 6-handed means it takes 3 people to carry it. Then there's different classifications for 2 people carriers, all the way down to fingertip size. And believe me, there actually are fingertip sized bonsai that look like mature trees. But again, I have this in here distinctly because the column on the right is really there for Americanized stylistic bonsai. You don't, and that's it's an Americanized cultural impact to bonsai. There are a lot of contrarians in bonsai that, again, it kind of goes back to what I was saying before about the self-empowered culture that we have here. It is what I say it is because I say it is. And many of those people find eventually the hard way that it isn't what they say it is just because they say it is, because they have to deal with horticulture. You don't have bonsai if your tree dies. and you can't get away from horticulture. It has to be importantly understood that bonsai is a living art form. And if the tree dies, then you no longer have your living art form. Occasionally, every culture, whether it's United States or Europe or wherever, some of these contrarians, mostly by accident, discover something new that works, and then other people repeat and refine, and that's how really any art form evolves over time, because contrarians, who a lot of people get annoyed by them and try to help educate them as to what is going to be unsuccessful about their contrarian practices, uh, get annoyed by that. But without them, there really wouldn't be much style advance or even horticultural advances. People have to try new things. So even amongst trained bonsai practitioners, there are subtle regional differences. And this is something it takes a while to actually begin to see, and you have to be able to accept the expansion of what bonsai really is. People who are not involved in bonsai, either as a hobbyist or experienced practitioners, just see little trees in pots and they think it's bonsai. But once you begin to recognize the subtle differences in the various different styles, you begin to see that actual bonsai is mostly now a European, American, Australian, South American, and Japanese art form. That's not to say that you don't see little trees in pots in other parts of the world, but the styles that they employ in Vietnam, Indonesia, Taiwan, Korea, China, and the Philippines are mostly consistent with Penjing. And this is not just a cultural thing, it's also an environmental thing. But in every case, when you ask people what they're hoping to achieve, what their objectives are, uh, not only for themselves, but for observers, they still seek the peace and calm and communion with nature. Whether it's Penjing in Asia or whether it's bonsai every place else, the Taoist and the Buddhist intent, the impression that everybody has in their mind, the feelings that they get from either practicing or observing bonsai is the peace and calm, serenity and communion with nature. Even to the extent that many people actually design their whole backyards, sometimes their whole houses, with Asian themed accoutrements that create an entirely Asian themed environment for their bonsai to live and for them to practice and for observers to participate by observation. They will get very elaborate too, koi ponds and shade screens and different style fences and buildings and things, the stands that they use. They even scrolls and artwork to build and enhance and expand the Asian themed environment for their quote unquote bonsai. So how do you get started in bonsai? By far and away, the best thing you can do is to join a local bonsai club or society. And it's important that the word local be in there because, as I've mentioned several times throughout this presentation now, bonsai is a very local thing. You can get trees that are native in other areas than where you live. You can, and you can keep them alive, but it's necessary that you understand your local environment. It's necessary that you understand that tree's native environment and how you're going to adapt your environment to what they need. It doesn't work the other way around. You cannot adapt the tree to where you are. You have to adapt where you are to the tree. And the reason I drill down on that particular topic with regard to your bonsai club or society is because your bonsai club or society is already going to be staffed and populated with people who have experience on growing Japanese black pines or European larches or blue atlas cedars or any of the other myriad of common bonsai trees which are not native to Texas, in Texas, and the different things you need to do. So the most experienced people that you will find for your local environment are going to be in a local society in your area. And there's very few areas in the world really where you can't find that you're within at most an hour of a bonsai club somewhere. You can go to the American Bonsai Society, and they have an actual page dedicated to all the different member clubs all around the country. And there's others for different countries, different regions and cultures that have their own bonsai societies that you can find something that's local to you. Another good option is joining an online forum or group, which again is going to already be staffed with people who are giving, sharing, offering their experience and their time to help you. And they, even though a lot of them may not be local to you, you will begin to recognize that some of them do a very good job of adapting their advice to your local context. Now, notice here, before I get too further down, there's nothing on here about buying a bonsai, because a lot of people, especially going back to some of the fraud that takes place in this hobby, they put these little bonsai trees that cost them a few dollars up as impulse items at the cash registers or near the front, so that you see them on your way out and you think, oh, that's so cute, it makes me feel good, I'm going to buy this bonsai tree. And then, only then, do they bother to actually find out about the tree, what their local environments are, and how they're actually going to bother to try to grow this thing. It's really important, if you want to succeed in an efficient and informed way, that you study these things and discover these things before before you actually buy a tree. And really, you see this a lot. People mean well, they really do. The intent is always good when you give somebody a gift, but when you're in line at Home Depot or in line at Target or in line at Walmart, and you see this cute little bonsai and you think, I bet Joe would really like that tree, don't buy people a bonsai tree gift, because it's a lot like buying somebody a pet, only worse, because you really don't know. With a pet, a cat, a dog, gerbil, you give them food and you give them water and you give them a place to live, and for the most part they live. But trees are really not house plants, and they're each genus of tree has its own individual needs that are unique from other genuses, and it's just not the same thing. So a gift certificate, or actually give them a membership in a bonsai society near them, or an online subscription to some of the online learning platforms would be much better. That way they find out, is this something really I'm interested in, before they buy and potentially kill a tree. Look at the local trees and shrubs in your area. It's very important that the trees that you work with, the material that you have, excites you. Some people just really love pine trees. Some people don't. Some people like Japanese maples. Some people like trident maples. Some people like junipers, and they really don't care that much about the other trees. So it's really important that you find trees, even local trees and shrubs, that actually excite you, that interest you, that you like the look of. And then you can look at other examples of bonsai. The internet is full of pictures of bonsai, but don't just look at them, study them. That's why I have in here look at lots of other bonsai examples. And the reason is you can just scroll through a few and think, oh, that's pretty, and move on to whatever else you've got going on in your life. But it's important that you, if you type in Japanese maple bonsai, you will see a wide range of development and types and styles of bonsai. And it's important that you begin to study the difference between them, because you will soon see, number one, that the maturity level difference in the different bonsai and the states of development and the different cultivars or species that are being used. And again, it's really important that you understand that bonsai is an outdoor hobby. If I were to characterize the second most common answer to those Facebook questions, what do you like most about bonsai? The second most popular answer easily is trees indoors. What's not to like? And it just doesn't happen. You can't. They don't live. Conifers and deciduous trees, especially, must have a change of seasons. It's not just the light. It's not just the temperatures. It's not just the humidities. It's everything. They must be outdoors. Even if you can keep them alive a little while, eventually they begin to lose energy when they don't get to go dormant, or they just keep growing until they run out of energy, or they just don't get enough light. Most trees die indoors within a year and a half or 2 years at most. The only exception to this are tropical trees like ficus and jade and many of the other subtropical trees that you have to bring them indoors when the temperatures outside get too cold, but all other times they need to be outdoors. They become, and a lot of people may get turned off by this. I try to be very agnostic, but when you bring trees indoors as quote unquote bonsai, what they really are houseplants. Bonsai, if you stop to think, when you that one of those earlier things where I was talking about examples, looking at examples online, bonsai is a very long journey, and it's measured in decades, even generations sometimes. And you can't progress trees from being a quote unquote stick in a pot to having the character of the trunk, the character of the bark, the ramification of the branches, with the puny amount of light that you get coming through a window, or even the puny amount of light that you can get from thousands of dollars worth of indoor lights. It just can't be reproduced. People have tried and tried and tried and tried, and it doesn't work. Not for bonsai. You can grow, I don't know, daffodils and all kinds of other things inside, short-term, regular house plants, whatever. I don't do house plants myself, but whatever other things that people want to grow as house plants indoors, fine. But those are not intended to develop into the powerful, mature bonsai that inspired you to want to take up this hobby. So understand that bonsai is a long-term journey, and you have to accept, I've kind of laced this in as an underlying theme, you have to accept that horticulture always comes before bonsai style. Bonsai has a unique set of horticultural practices. Some of it is basic horticulture, a lot of it is not. If you are good at growing houseplants, if you're good at growing vegetables, that's great. That's a good start. You've got a basic introduction to horticulture, but don't kid yourself into thinking that now you're going to be a bonsai master, because there are some very different horticultural needs that bonsai have that aren't applicable to landscape trees and aren't applicable to garden vegetables and such. So the Bonsai Society of Dallas, I'll try to wrap it up here. The Bonsai Society of Dallas, we meet at 9 a.m. on the first Saturday of every month. We meet in the classroom at North Haven Gardens on North Haven Drive in Dallas, in North Dallas. All meetings are also streamed live on Zoom. So if you can't make it to one of the meetings, you can always join Zoom wherever you are. We have frequent Bring Your Own Tree, BYOT stands for Bring Your Own Tree classes, where you actually get to bring the trees that you're working on to the meeting, and we help you progress them through different stages of development. We also have visiting artists. For example, our last meeting had an artist that traveled from England. We brought him in from England to teach us about carving deadwood on bonsai. And we also have additional workshops with these artists that take place after the regular meeting. We have an annual show and exhibit. We have an annual auction, which is a great opportunity to buy other material that's not. So a lot of people say, all right, Brian, so if I'm not going to buy that impulse item at Walmart, or I'm not going to pick up that Malsai at the Home Depot, where do I buy my trees? Well, there are a lot of pre-bonsai nurseries, myself included, and a lot of other members in our club have trees that they propagate themselves, and then they bring them to the annual auction and sell them. So there's lots of ways to get proper bonsai material other than wasting $25, $30, $50 on the Malsai at the Home Depot. We also frequently have raffles where some of our artist material that's been worked by an artist is worth several hundreds, sometimes thousands of dollars. You buy a $5 or $10 raffle ticket, and you could get a several $100 tree for $10. We have a fully staffed board. Our board of directors is the management of the society. A lot of volunteer organizations struggle to staff their board of directors, and consequently the programs suffer. But our board of directors is fully staffed. We have, well, I say that. Technically speaking, our membership chair has just retired, so we're looking for a membership chair if anybody out there is interested. But all our other positions, the president, two vice presidents, and so forth, all the other roles are full, and we're fully functioning. We have 74 members and counting. We are a member club of the Lone Star Bonsai Federation, which also hosts an annual convention in the state. So there are 9, about to be 10 different member clubs around the state, and including Louisiana. And every year we have a convention hosted by one of the member clubs. This year we just had the convention in San Antonio. And so a lot of people travel down to San Antonio and look at their trees and learn their classes and so forth. You can find us on Facebook. Just search for Bonsai Society of Dallas. We're also on the internet at bonsaisocietyofdallas.com, or you can email me at president@bonsaisocietyofdallas.com. Our annual memberships are $30 for an individual and $35 for a household. So if you have several kids or husband and wife, then you want to join as a household. And I believe that wraps it up, Judy. Right on time.
All right, beautiful. Thank you. Wow, that's just so interesting. I didn't know any of that. So it's all news to me. And I will say I'm one of the people that at once in my gardening life bought a bonsai, and it didn't even last a year and a half. I mean, it was gone within, I'd say, 3 or 4 months.
One of the interesting things one of the interesting things that happens is most of these mulesi trees that get bought are junipers.
Yes.
And they buy them. It's nice and green, and they take it home, and it stays green for 2 or 3 months, and then it turns brown, and their first reaction is, what did I do to kill it? Well, in reality, it was probably dead when you bought it. And the reason is a lot of these trees, especially conifers, just like your Christmas trees, can stay green long after they're dead. So it causes people to have a lot of guilt about, oh my gosh, what did I do? I must have killed this tree. And in reality, it was probably already dead when you bought it.
When you bought it. Oh, wow. Isn't that something? Is that kind of, I'm still not, and maybe it doesn't matter. I understand what you were saying about the Americans. We put a lot of criteria on them, where in Asia and some other parts of the world, they don't. But is part of the American, what you call the American influence, that is the type of tree part of that as well, that we have different types of trees that people tend to gravitate toward when they become more skilled at this art form?
Yes.
Does that have anything to do with it?
Well, it does. There are, and I will talk more about this in 2 weeks. There's 10 key bonsai that the Japanese mostly influence, and you find those trees in the US. A lot of them have been imported. A lot of people actually cultivate American copies of these trees, but then also it kind of gets back into how the local environments affect the style and culture of bonsai, because silver maples grow different from Japanese maples. And if you're not in an area where you can grow a Japanese maple easily, you have to deal with silver maples. And so not just how you grow a silver maple, but the way the tree ends up looking, the way you style it to achieve the miniaturized result ends up affecting the style. So yes, everywhere, and that's not just an American thing, that's a European thing. Everywhere has their own environmental impacts, not just from weather, but also the native trees.
So if you're putting your bonsai outside, it just fascinates me that you're saying, even though they're small, they're this diminutive size compared to a large tree of the same species. They are able to tolerate, say, the Texas sun.
Yes.
But I guess if it's one that doesn't like as much sun, or an understory type tree, you would try to put it in a more shaded areas.
Well, you actually buy shade fabric. So from mid-May through the end of September, half of my garden is covered with a 50% shade fabric for all of the trees that are sensitive to that.
I see.
There are a lot of trees. Again, it goes back to what I was saying. You have to adapt your environment to what the tree needs. The tree's genetics are fixed and static. You can't change what it needs, but you have to adapt your environment to what the tree needs. And yes, Texas does.
Go ahead,
Texas
please.
does have blistering sun, and so you have to. My Japanese maples is a really good example. From about the end of May through the end of September, spend their entire life in the shade. They don't get any direct sun. And also another aspect of Texas, they call Chicago the Windy City, but really we have a lot more wind here in Dallas than Chicago has, and wind just destroys Japanese maples. So my Japanese maples have a little nook in my yard where they just live 100% in the shade and completely protected from wind.
Oh, I see. So interesting. And of course, watering, they depend on on us to water them. And
Every
when
day.
it rains on them, every day you water
Every
them.
day. Sometimes some of them twice a day.
Wow.
I
Okay.
will get into this in more in
Okay.
2 weeks, but
Absolutely. Bonsai 101.
yeah, we grow bonsai. A lot of people would look at the soil, quote unquote, soil that we use to grow bonsai, but a lot of people would look at that and say, that's rocks. Why are you growing your trees in rocks? There's no actual soil in bonsai soil, not in the traditional sense like you would go and buy garden soil or potting soil and things like that. Some people try to use a little bit of it, but their trees suffer. They grow in lava and they grow in pumice and another component called akadama. And there's very specific reasons I'll get into next week with regard to that. But there's a lot of gas exchange. The soil breathes very well, and so the soil dries out. And so in Texas and a lot of other places as well, you really have to dedicate yourself to watering the tree every day.
I see. Yeah. And so getting to the society itself. So it's, you just had you said you just went to it was like a statewide
convention in San Antonio. Yes.
Okay. And do people bring their trees? Are there showcases, or is this mainly about learning?
There's a statewide exhibit where people bring the best of their trees to the exhibit. And then there's a judging for the different categories of the trees, different styles and types. There's like a best Texas native, which oddly enough was won by a Louisiana tree. But so yes, there's an exhibit. There's also different workshops that are held. It's a 3-day convention. And so we have 3 traveling artists that come in, featured artists, and they do 2 workshops a day. Some of the workshops are bring your own trees. So yes, a lot of people that would travel from Dallas to San Antonio would take the trees that they want to use in those bring your own tree workshops and take them to the hotel and then work with their trees.
Right. And then you said that you had told me that you all do get together quite often with the Fort Worth Club. Is that right?
We do, yes. A lot of times because we're so close, we will share an artist where we share the airfare and the hotel expenses, and then we'll employ him here for a demonstration and a workshop on Saturday or Sunday, and Fort Worth will do the same thing for whatever other day.
Yeah, we would love to have the opportunity to air one of those. That would be so interesting if we could figure out how to do that. And I wanted to ask you, what is the oldest tree that you have?
The oldest tree that I have is if you hadn't asked me, I would just blurt it right out. It's 175 years old, and it was collected off a mountain in Colorado. Wow. Which is a style of bonsai called Yamadori. It's a ponderosa pine, Pinus ponderosa. And there's specific ways of measuring its age without counting the rings. And on ponderosa pines, you can use a caliper to measure the thickness of the bark. And we know scientifically that the bark builds so much depth over time, and so you measure how thick the bark is, and that tells you how old the tree is.
How fabulous. It's so interesting.
There's another gentleman here in town who has what's called a 1-seed juniper, Juniperus monosperma, that is measured to be over 2,000 years old.
Wow. 2,000 years old?
Yeah, it was collected here in Texas. It has a deadwood vein on it that measures over 2 feet wide, and or just at 2 feet wide, and they add depth to that deadwood vein at a rate of an inch per 100 years.
Wow, that is fascinating. Spellbinding, actually, to think that that plant is still alive today. If it could only talk.
Right.
That would be terrific. The stories it could tell. I want to change topic just a bit. You had mentioned to me when we first spoke, because you do propagate, that you were interested in the Dallas Public Library Seed Library.
Yes.
So I want to make sure that I wanted to mention that and make that connection with the folks here at the Seed Library. So I want to thank you so much for being here. We really look forward to the program coming up on the 7th. Everybody, please mark your calendars, and we'll continue pushing the word out about this, and look forward to having you back and the audience on Tuesday, June the 7th.
I look forward to it.
Yeah. But thank you so much. This was really fascinating. You just tell a great story, and you provide so much interesting information. Like I said, it's just a whole different approach and view. And thank you for getting us on the right path for bonsai.
You're very welcome. I look forward to it, and I enjoyed today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Brian. Thank you, Judy.
Thank you.
We will see you all next time. Have a good day.
Mm-hmm.